Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Marcie Glenn, and we're going to talk about who's the hiring team's real competition. Because I've been in many hiring situations, and we always think it's those horrible competition people that we always hate, but maybe it's not. But Marcie is going to talk about that. Marcie, where can people find you?
They can find us on our website at anothersource.com.
Excellent. So, Marcie, let's get in and talk about. So, hiring's no different than it's been like 10 years ago, is
it? Interesting way to start the conversation, Tim.
I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, let's go big. Let's go big. Hiring is very similar. There's definitely similar trends, and the way that you engage a candidate has changed, but really a consistent process, and the ultimate goal of the interview is still the same. How we do it has changed a little bit, and I think that's where we have to evolve.
Without being, asking, so I am getting so many things that are coming at me under, books, articles, whatever, that the hiring process or the reason that somebody wants to work at an organization has changed totally.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing a podcast this week, and we were talking about the 5 Ps that you would expect in an organization: product, pricing, platform, process, and people. And there was a comment that came into the thing said, "What about planet?" And when we went back to the person after that, quite rightly, he said, "What about people's purpose? What about the impact? What about the ESG policy of the company?" All of these things we never talked about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Question, what has that made an impact to recruitment?
Yeah, I think there's two things really that are significant drivers of that. One is generational. The generations want different things out of the time that they spend working and giving back to their employer. And I think the second thing that drove that most recently is COVID. It gave us a sense of mortality, and how we all choose to spend our time maybe has shifted a bit. And how we qualify that time has shifted a bit. And I think for me, that's really the key aspect that employers need to think about is candidates or future employees are qualifying how they spend their time. And if employers want to compete, they need to get into that game of helping them qualify them into that. And that's the key piece.
Because we've been in a situation, haven't we, where going back 12 months ago, we did some research. A headhunter friend of mine did some research, and he told me that there was 5 jobs on LinkedIn for one person.
Yeah. There's 1.6 for every unemployed worker right now.
Whereas on LinkedIn it's changed, but the thing is that the attitude hasn't. My partner has a 28-year-old, and he's a great barometer for me in terms of he just quit his job. Why? Because it's not really what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Not the way they want to spend their time.
It's not. No. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't just leave because you walked out the last one after 2 years. And he said, no, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. It's I think what we talked about, the title of this, who's the hiring team's real competition, and we talk about how an employer presents themselves or shares their story with potential candidates and applicants is really critical, more critical than it's ever been. And it's not about a flashy marketing campaign. It's transparency and value driven.
And also, offering things in terms of, a succession plan, a very clear process in terms of where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and not just your output, but what the employer's output is.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to mention too, Tim, that as we talk about qualifying candidates, qualifying an employer, that doesn't mean that it needs to be a mission-driven organization or institution. It just means that the employer needs to be real clear on what they can offer and how they offer that, so that a candidate can qualify whether that aligns with what they're looking to get out of this next 2 to 3 to 5 year stint, if that.
So what are hiring managers now competing with?
I think ultimately they're competing with their own lack of engagement. And what I mean by that is, it's like, interviewing is like dating. That's an analogy that's been around for decades. But no one really enjoys dating. And it typically in the hiring process is a reactive measure for the most part. It's not something that we do regularly and consistently when we don't have an opening. And so in this idea that there's multi-generations in the interview process, they're qualifying you and they have choice now, really changes the conversation. And hiring managers and hiring teams need to get clear on what their value proposition is before they go out to market, before they put out that job posting, tell colleagues, and really before they start the interview process.
So what are employees looking for?
I think it really varies, Tim. Functionally, generationally, geography, it all varies. I think there's some common trends. I think people want to understand, how is my work relevant? And that's different for everyone. Number two, am I using my gifts? Am I using my strengths? Right. And then that fills up our cups, right? If we're flexing those strengths and muscles. And, third, I think, you could have a lot of different conversations around work-life balance, compensation, team, culture. But I think the first two are really is my work relevant to me? And second, am I using my gifts?
And when you say work-life balance, that's not just buying a table tennis table.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And that, Tim, brings up, an entire conversation of work-life balance and remote and hybrid and all of the different work opportunities that we have now. But you can't have that conversation without having an equity conversation as well across an organization. If you offer hybrid to certain employees, how does that impact employees that maybe have to be on site regularly? They're still paying for gas, they're still paying for parking, but the ones that are working remotely aren't. And is that equitable? So I think there's a lot of conversations going on, and that's why ultimately hiring managers have got to get clear on what their value proposition is before they go to market.
I was having a conversation, as you do, out with dinner on Saturday nights, and someone said, "Oh yes, we're offering hybrid working for this part of the company, but of course we can't offer it to this set of people." And a number of us just like, really, like you can't just offer one thing to one person and not another.
Yeah. It's an interesting. It's really a conversation that's going to go on for a while, and I don't think there's one solution to it. But if you think of it, even just outside of within an organization, if you think about maybe retail workers or restaurant workers, they're still incurring the cost of commuting, the cost of gas, et cetera. Whereas I, as a professional, work 100% remotely. So now really my standard of living has increased. My outflow of expenses has decreased. So everything is great for me. But when you think about maybe hospitality or retail workers, that's not changing for them.
No, I went into London yesterday for a meeting. It was the first time probably for 3 months, and I couldn't believe the cost of food. I mean, some of the things have gone up. I've needed to £3, which is what, $7 or $8.
Yeah. My husband and I were talking about the same thing yesterday after lunch, right? Yeah, but they have to go up in order to compensate for what employees are, the cost of employing.
So we've had a question in from Evelyn, which is, any strategies you would recommend to hiring managers to share this value proposition? Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think really it's getting clear. Let's take a financial analyst. That can go across all industries. You're hiring for a financial analyst. It's a common position across all industries. So really, what is it about this role in my organization, working on my team, makes this role unique? And why would someone want that? Is it the way that they collaborate? Is it the way that they're extracting data? Is it the story that they're telling with the information? Is it how they're telling the information? Is it who they're telling it to? It's not a differentiator as much as it is allowing me as a potential candidate to determine, is that work relevant to me, and am I using my gifts in doing it?
And yes, Tom.
I was just going to say, Tim, it's taking it one step further. How am I doing this role? What is the role doing? What's the impact this role has in the organization?
Yeah, and we're getting asked a lot, certainly in the world of sales, because what we're finding is that nobody wants to go into sales anymore. And so when we ask people and say, okay, when you're in your sales role, what impact are you making on the world, or what purpose do you have? They say there isn't anything. Because the expectation from the leadership is you turn up and you start dialing or whatever it is you do, and that seems to be completely lost.
Well, I think, when I look at sales, if I'm overgeneralizing, one of the reasons people go into sales is unlimited compensation, unlimited earnings. And that has to align to that person's relevancy and what they want to get out of it. And that will certainly narrow the pool. It always has, right? Sales seems very sexy and attractive at the outgate, but once you get in and start dialing all day long, it really isn't for everyone. So I think it goes back again to, is it relevant to me? Can I hit the end goal that I'm looking for? And most of the time that's compensation when it comes to sales.
Dorothy Mashburn has come up with a great comment, question. Realistic, Wall Street rewards short-term gains. Yes. So the leaders who deliver results are revered. How do you incentivize executives to think long-term health of the organization?
Great question. I think there's two things at play here. One is the population shortage that we're just on the cusp of, that none of us have ever dealt with, that will, I think, literally force us to think differently and think about how we plan for the long term. I think the second thing is in terms of getting leadership to think long term, it's about the questions we pose to them. It's about the business case or the opportunities that we bring to them to help allow them to solve. I think we have to look at our role in the organization primarily from a people resource or a human resource area and determine, okay, if this is the data, if these are the goals of the organization, how do I get leadership on board with that? And what do I put in place and get buy-in and support for in order to solve that? And it will be, monetary resource probably like never before, just given the shortage that's about to continue to occur.
Yeah, I think there's regardless of whether we're in a recession, a downturn, or whatever, I think that there's a feeling that we can immediately, it's a buyer's market and we can go and pick and choose if we want.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually sure. I think people are actually opting sometimes not to go into work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So going back to my partner's 28-year-old, he's currently cycling around Europe because he doesn't want to go to work. And I think people are opting to do that.
Right.
One of the things that my partner's 28-year-old said to me, he said, I would never apply for a job where their website's in Times Roman. One of the things I think that people, and another thing is where you say, send us your CV, and then you have to type in a whole load of stuff. I think people's systems are getting in the way of getting and hiring people. Or are they? Question.
Yes, and no. Yes, I think ultimately when, technology has came a long way when it comes to applicant tracking systems. And now we can have first and second level applications in order to speed it up for the candidate and not make it a barrier. So ultimately you have to look at the application process and what in it is a barrier for a candidate. So yes, there are some that are still out there that are very laborious and it is a barrier. Most organizations have sped that up. And now with, linkages to LinkedIn and Indeed and some of the major job boards, you can just use that login and it uploads it for you. I think where I really see the barriers occur in the application process is really when you start adding requirements in order to apply. So a cover letter, a statement. Right now, a statement on diversity is being required. Those to me are barriers for two reasons. One, the idea of, first of all, professionals are fatigued. All of us are.
Yep.
Our attention span is very short and there's a ton of noise out there. So to add things for me to do in order to learn more, because that's essentially what I'm doing by applying for the job, is I'm engaging in a learning process. But to put requirements on me to put forward things in order to learn are to me a disengagement barrier. So that's one thing. We just don't have the time to do it.
Yeah.
The process has changed. I think the second thing that becomes a barrier in that is, as I mentioned, it's disengaging. How are we giving back to the candidate? I think when we set up those requirements, it's the attempt is to make it easier for me, the hiring manager, but what it really becomes is a weapon. It's not a tool to us better assess candidates with a cover letter and a diversity statement. It becomes a weapon. So that's really where I see the barriers, less on the technology side and more of the requirements that get put into the application process.
Yeah, I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn where there was 16 different requirements in terms of the, has to be degree level, needs to be able to commute into the office, and all of these things. And even in work, regardless of what market we're in for, it's just another way of, in effect, saying, well, actually, there's nobody there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the intent around that, of course, is, okay, let's put these pieces up, and so the candidates that come through, we know are really interested. I understand the intent, but I think where we have to shift our perspective and our mindset is that's exactly when they end up competing with themselves. They have to shift perspective and think about, how do I create conversations with potential talent that can impact my organization? And that may look a little different than it has in the past.
And Andrew's come up with a great point, because we've been talking about recruitment, but there's also about retainment as well. And if we're going to get people to come, if we're going to get the best people to come and stay within our organization, clearly we need to stop putting barriers in the way. And the technology is, well, I'm not going to bother replying. But what Andrew says is, as the workforce in any field has become more fluid and moved from role to role more frequently, do companies lack succession planning and incentives for people to stay with them?
I think, Andrew, yes. Overall, I think we as organizations lack succession planning, or I should say robust succession planning that can be measured in success and incentives. When we interview candidates, I would say, and again, an overgeneralization, the number one reason people are looking to make a change is they're not getting something that they want in their current role. It's typically not compensation. It's typically a level of leadership, a level of growth. Maybe they're trying to attain their next step in their career. And that's just not happening. I would say where I see a real opportunity in talking with organizations and thinking about the positions that we recruit on is, if organizations can help get a strong individual contributor the management level experience so they don't have to leave your organization to get it, I think that's a huge opportunity to create more stay with employees. There's that constant balance of, I'm a senior financial analyst, and now I want to move to be a finance manager. And oftentimes that finance manager comes up in the organization and they hire an external candidate because I didn't have the leadership. So what happens is I go apply for a finance manager position at another organization and I get it. It's not a gap, but that issue has to change in order for employers to retain. I would say that's the biggest thing that we see.
Yeah, and I think there's that reluctance, isn't there, from employers to say, it's like, well, I've got this pool of people, and they need to stay where they are, rather than actually saying, I've got a bunch of individuals who actually what I need to do is empower and to grow.
Mhm.
And if sometimes that means they leave, but we need to be actually making sure that we're getting the next bunch of people to come through in the organization.
Right. And that's hard work, and it's a lot of effort, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of planning, and that is an additional aspect to, you know, if we're talking finance, the finance, the AVP of finance, that they're not an expert in that. So how do we equip them with resources and people around them to allow them to be able to do that in their organization? It's an organizational design that has to shift a bit.
Marcie, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. We could have gone on for a long time, actually, and I think the questions will keep coming in as well. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Again, you can find us on our website. It's anothersource.com, or you can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Marcie Glenn, Marcie, last name Glenn, Glenn.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight. It's a fascinating subject, something that I think it's never. I still don't think it's not set. It's still fluid.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
it continually change. The jelly that was upset from COVID, I'm mixing my metaphors, but it's still not set, and it's still wobbly.
Yep, agreed. Thanks for having me, Tim. It was great to speak with you.